Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 3P's podcast, brought to you by Zeus Fire and Security, where our mission is to protect people, property, and profits. I'm Scott Elkins, CEO of Zeus, and your host today. Today's episode tackles one of the hardest parts of the M&A journey, telling your team. It's a moment many sellers fear and often delay. I've been there myself. After 32 years of building my own business, my team was like family. Even though I chose a partner I fully trusted, telling my team members was still the hardest thing I've ever done. Waiting might feel easier in the moment, but in my experience, it leads to confusion, mistrust, and long-term damage. That's why we're starting this series to offer guidance and share best practices we've seen that make a real difference. Joining me today is Paul Ritter, CFO at Zeus, and someone who's helped guide dozens of sellers through this exact moment. We'll share lessons learned, real-world examples, and practical advice to help you get through this process. Because at Zeus, we believe the deal isn't the end of the journey, but rather the beginning. And it starts with how you bring your people along for the ride. Paul, great to have you back in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Paul, let's jump right into it. Paul, why is this part of the journey so hard for sellers? What is it about telling their employees that makes this process so difficult?
So it's clear right behind the decision of whether or not to sell the company, this is absolutely the hardest part of the process. You have these very savvy business people that have no problem going in, talking to the largest companies in the world, and they become emotionally paralyzed. And they feel two things. The first is they feel like they're betraying their employees. They've got these group of people, these employees that they've been with forever, but they've become more than employees. Yeah. They're actually family. And they feel like their family is not going to trust their decision. They feel like they won't think it's the right decision. And then the second thing is they get afraid. They're afraid their employees won't respect them anymore. They're afraid they won't believe in them. But more than that, they get afraid that if they tell too many people, it's going to get out and somehow will hurt the process. And so you have these two conflicting things going on. They want to tell employees. They need to tell employees, but they're afraid of it and they become paralyzed.
Having done this myself 3.5 years ago, I empathize with sellers. It is a scary proposition. For me, it was 32 years of developing really familial relationship with so many of our employees.
Right.
And then one day you're going to tell them that the business is no longer exactly the same way it was before. And you do feel, at least I felt myself, like you're disappointing them or letting them down. But I did know that what we were really doing was giving them an opportunity, giving the business an opportunity, our employees and our customers an opportunity to do something bigger and better than ever before. So how do we square the circle? How do you deal with the reality? It's an emotional reality that I experienced and every seller's experienced, with the other reality, which is this is actually good for their business.
Right. You have to first speak from the heart. You can't script it. You have to be prepared. So I think people make two big mistakes when they go about it. One is they're not prepared and they think they can wing it. Mm-hmm. They get with their employees and they go through, I've talked to them a ton of times, dozens of times. I can handle this. And they go in and they don't know the questions. They don't know how to respond. They don't know how people are feeling. And all of a sudden it comes across as disrespect. And then they have lost their employees.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. So they have to be ready. And you can't overcomplicate it. They don't want to hear facts and figures and legal clauses. They want to know what it means for them. And once they've had a chance to process that, then they're willing to think about what it means for you as the seller. But they have to get past that first hurdle first.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think I've seen, I think we've seen together doing this long enough now, is that sellers try to comfort their employees in such a way that the employees won't feel any discomfort during the transaction. And the reality of it is, employees will feel some discomfort. Whether or not that discomfort is valid is not for us to judge. It's right. The employee that's going to feel the way they're going to feel. But we can't stop people from feeling the way they feel. So should they try?
So I would say they need to understand how the people are going to feel. They shouldn't try and control it. As I said, speaking from the heart is the most important thing. If you take a step back and think about why those employees matter to you, the message will come out clear, right? Don't script it, be prepared, think about why they matter to you and speak from that place. That's what leaders do. Your employees are going to respond to it. You don't need to worry about how they're going to feel or think about how they're going to feel. You need to be open and honest with them. They'll tell you how they feel, and then you can respond to that.
In fact, they'll tell you how they feel, typically not in the first 24 hours, right? But typically in the next 48 or 72 hours. What's that about?
Well, we see that during this process. We see it during the integration process. They hear what you've said. They think they've processed it. They go home, they talk to a loved one, they talk to a friend, they talk to someone, and they go, I didn't ask that question. I didn't think about this. I didn't think about that. The next day is the most important one. You have to make time for emotion the first day. You have to make time for questions the second day.
Yeah. So help me draw a distinction. So the first day, the emotions are high and people really aren't thinking clearly.
That's right.
The second day, emotions drop and people start thinking, hey, how does this impact me?
That's exactly right. They, as I said, they don't get to that place of thinking about how it impacts their friends or how it impacts you as the seller until they get past how does it impact me. But they really haven't had a chance to think about how it will impact them that first day. They've heard the news, it's a sale, and we talk about all the time, my brother's cousin knows someone that was sold or that was bought and everything changed, and the worst possible story they've heard becomes what's going to happen for them.
Yeah.
It's very emotional. Then they get time to process and they say, well, wait a minute, what is going to change? What's not going to change? And so as a seller, if you're prepared with those answers of this is what's going to change, because things will change.
For sure.
This is what's not going to change. And when you have those right at hand when they come and ask you those questions, it gives them even more confidence in you than they already had. And that's critical.
We know that during a transaction process, some things are going to stay exactly the same and a number of things are going to change as well. Is it best for a seller to try to convince their employees of that on day one, or let us convince them, or is there no convincing at all and just showing people?
So some things are going to change and some things are going to stay the same. We want to let them know what things are going to change. We don't need to tell them how they're going to change. But what they do need to know is if they came to work in a uniform yesterday, they're going to wear that same uniform tomorrow. They're going to report to the same person. They're going to go work at the same customer site. And so there's comfort in those things that aren't going to change. But waiting to tell people about the things that are going to change is just asking for a problem. It's like waiting too long to tell your employees about the transaction.
Yeah.
The longer you wait, the harder it is. The harder it is, the longer you wait, and it becomes a bad cycle.
So let's go right there. Telling employees about the transaction also comes with some risk and some benefit. So what are the benefits of doing it? What are the risks? And then what are best practices? Because now we've seen this, as of the day of this recording, we've seen this 24 times.
Right.
What are best practices? We certainly have them.
So there's a couple risks. One is you wait too long and then people already know about it. I tell sellers all the time, your employees are smart. There's a group of employees that you need for the transaction. They have to pull information for you. You've come in every day for a decade and asked someone for, hey, can I have the sales report? Can I have the operations report? And today you walk in and you don't ask for those and you say, hey, I need these 37 documents. And then you do that over and over again for a month or two. They know something's up. They immediately go to the worst place. Hey, this is bad. Something's wrong. It's not going to be good for me. And then when you tell them and it's not bad for them, then they feel like you don't trust them.
Yeah, so that trust is an interesting thing because if you've operated a business for a long time and you've got long-term employees, there is that trust. And now you're about to do something which is good for you as a seller, which is good for your business, for your employees and your customers, but you run the risk of betraying, in their minds, your most loyal and dedicated employees. How do you avoid that?
So I think I said before, you have to speak from the heart. Let me give you an example of someone that I thought did the best at this. They came in, they brought in their key employees, and they started with the story of why they initially started the business to begin with, and talked about all the highs and lows through that journey. And along the way, they hit on an individual point where they interacted with every person in the room. They had a conversation that became personal and not about business. And then they went into why now was the right time. As you start to go through that piece, people understand, well, at some point you probably are going to sell the business. It isn't necessarily that you're going to hold it forever. At some point you will sell it. And then the conversation is now about not am I or am I not going to sell, it's why is now the right time. You've made that personal connection. You've let employees feel special because in reality they are. That's why they're your employees.
Because they are your best employees. Let's say you have a business with 70 employees and you've identified 10% 7 absolute key employees. If you bring them into the process, you've not only, based on what you just said, made them feel better about things, but you've also included them in it so that there's that trust. But the additional benefit there is that those 7 employees can become the cheerleaders for the other 63, right, once the transaction happens.
That's right. So I talked to a lot of sellers about doing this in stages. That first stage you talked about is bringing in your key employees, the ones that you need to really run the business today. You'll need them through close, you need them after close. They're key. But there is a second stage. There's another group of people in the company that are really your thought leaders. They may not be that same group. Later on in the process, you're going to want to bring in those people. Those really are your cheerleaders. Those are the ones that when something happens, everyone turns to look and see how they react. And if they're on the inside already at that point, people see them being calm, not upset, not feeling betrayed, and it can significantly help you move the process forward with momentum.
So we've seen sellers address this 2 different ways. Some have had conversations exactly like, maybe 3 different ways. Some have had conversations exactly like you've just stated. Some have chosen not to have the conversation, and the word blindsided always comes up. Employees say they felt blindsided. But some sellers also not only bring employees under the tent, but they also present them with a stay bonus or a retention bonus.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that and how you've seen that work and if it's something we even recommend.
At that point, people aren't ready to listen to economics. If you start talking about that, all they hear is a transaction. They're not hearing you. Have the conversation about why now is the right time, why they're important to the business. Give them that time to get past the emotional piece of it. Give them the time to ask the questions, and then come to them one-on-one and talk about those incentives, why they're critical to the business, why they're going to be important, not just through the data close, but after. They want to know they have a future as well. That's very important. If you do that with the right monetary incentive, it works very well.
So as of the date of this recording, right, we've gone through 24 closings.
Right.
One of the things that we hear sellers talk about early in the process is they're afraid that if word gets out, right, their competitors are going to use it against them, their employees are going to leave. 24 events we've gone through together, you and me.
Right.
Has that ever happened?
No.
So where does the fear come from and why doesn't it happen?
So the fear does come from a real place. People that handle this poorly do run that risk of losing key employees. I think that it hasn't happened for us because we start these conversations on day 1.
So let's talk about who's on site from Zeus day 2.
Right. So
because that's the day, right? That's the day when if your employee is going to have a concern, that's the day you're likely to hear about it.
That's right. So day 2, we always have HR is there. So Alyssa Egan, usually maybe someone else from her team as well is there to ask questions. And sometimes it's, hey, how does the medical benefit plan work? Or what's my vacation? I really wasn't paying attention yesterday. Or they come, what does this mean for me? What about that? What about my son who also works here? I've got another family member. Do you allow that? Well, yes, we do. But those questions become important. Usually I'm there the second day. We think about the process. We like to close on a Tuesday or Wednesday, right? The second day then we've got HR, some finance people, operations folks there. On Thursday, we're there again. Friday morning we'll come in. We might bring coffee and bagels and donuts. We're gone by midday. We want it to return to normal very quickly because at the end of the day, it isn't about us. It's about them. And it's about running the business. We view it as we're trying to help them grow their business faster. We're not trying to run it for them.
Yeah, and I think that somehow gets lost in the conversation, particularly on that critical day 1.
Yeah.
If as somebody that's been through this now as often as we have, I've come to the conclusion that there's very little we can do to predict exactly those questions on day 2, but there's also nothing we can do to stop questions on day 2. For me, I want to get to day 2 as quickly as possible so that we can finish those last round of questions because the answers are almost always really good.
That's right.
And then the employee gets to go back home that next day and say, yes, I did ask the question about dental. I did ask it about vacation days. I did ask it about holidays. And I've got to tell you, the answers were all better than I expected. Now, all of a sudden, that employee becomes a fan of the process.
What's really interesting to see is when we do our job well on day 1 and on day 2, you can feel the energy on day 3 when people come back. They've already, for the most part, put the transaction behind them. They're excited to move forward. They actually want to show us and the owner, hey, listen, I was a key employee for a reason. Let me show you what I can do. And they've put that emotion behind them, and they're not just walking forward, they're running. And that's exciting to see.
It is. It is. And, I remember one closing in particular, a company with a lot of technicians. We're talking to me and Alyssa, we're talking to technicians, and you see a lot of kind of scowls on faces, a lot of arms folded, a lots of leaning back in the chair. And it's like, the whole defensive posturing of, I'm not happy. And 3 hours later, after we break for lunch, and then we come back and we talk a little bit as human beings, those days tend to end with hearty handshakes and a lot of hugs. That no longer surprises me. It's almost expected now.
It is. I think the most exciting and gratifying piece for me is when you see that person that had the arms crossed or that was frustrated or didn't believe come up to you at the end of the day and say, hey, I understand.
Yeah.
Right? It makes sense now. I see the vision. And the most gratifying piece for me is not when they're giving us the handshake or hug, when they're turning to the seller and giving them a hug, because they're really happy for them.
Yeah. So I'll give you your preamble because you always say it. Fair enough. Until the day of the transaction, it's the seller's company, it's the seller's employees. He and she can do whatever they want. But if they asked you, and if you could project your best practice on them, what would the 2 or 3 highlights be of that best practice? I know we've talked a lot about them, but succinctly?
2 things I would tell every seller. The first is don't wait. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. The second one is be prepared and speak from the heart. When you do that, you're in a position to remember why you're to you. You speak from that place, and you're really a leader. And people are going to respond to you being that leader.
So, Paul, as we get ready to wrap this up, I think it'd be interesting for the audience to hear kind of 2 examples. One that didn't go so well and one that went really well, how they differed and what the outcomes were.
Sure. So I'll use one from my time at Zeus for the one that went well. I'm going to go back to my prior life, prior experience, the one that didn't go well. And I'll actually start with the one that didn't go well so we can end on a positive note.
For sure.
Worked with a seller, phenomenal company. I won't say the name of the company, but it was in the chemical industry, going back pretty far. And they had decided that they had a really small group of key people, but they were afraid to tell them. They were afraid it was going to get out. They were afraid the people were going to leave. And so they decided they weren't going to tell anyone until the day before. And so everyone in that key group was going to find out about 15 to 16 hours before closing. And then all the employees were going to find out that next morning. And so they went through the entire process. It was obvious to us as a buyer that their key employees knew because they were the ones pulling all the information, all the documents. But
sure.
They just weren't being told. They knew. Their employees are smart. They finally got to the point of telling them, and a couple of employees said, yeah, I'm probably not going to stay. You didn't trust me enough. I knew there was a transaction going on. I felt like something was happening. And 2 of them threatened to leave. And it actually delayed the closing for about a week. That ended up working out okay, but it took a lot. They felt completely betrayed, said, if you trusted me enough to run your company, to manage the bank account, I know your family, we've been on vacation together, we've had dinner together, we've done stuff, but you didn't trust me enough to tell me this and tell me the last day. And it almost blew up a very lucrative transaction for the seller.
So that potentially could have been a horrible result.
Absolutely.
Right, so give me one under our time at Zeus that went really well.
So one of the ways I've seen it work best in one of the transactions, person had a small group of key employees, 5 or 6. They brought in pretty early in the process, not at the very beginning, but they identified who was going to have to help them, right? And who also was key to running the business. It was both those groups they brought in together. They told them early on. They had a conversation around, this is what we're doing and this is why, right? Same thing, the evening they had a dinner together and told everyone. And then the night before closing, they had a dinner with that same group. They actually had talked about incentives. They gave everyone their incentive check at that dinner the night before.
Wow.
So they felt, listen, this is really happening. Then the next day, they didn't do just a meeting, they did a lunch. And you were there, I was there, the whole team was there at various stages. They had all their employees in, and they told everyone exactly, this is what we're doing and why. And most of the time was why. The what took 30 seconds. They spent a good bit of time on the why. They let people ask every question they had. And then we all had lunch together. When that was done, they let employees go home. They gave them the rest of the day off. They gave them that time to process emotionally, then to come back with any questions the next day. They came back with a ton of questions the next day, which was wonderful because they got everything answered.
Yeah.
And it has been a fantastic partnership with the company.
Yeah. So almost the old analogy of whether or not you rip the Band-Aid off or you take it off slowly. We all know it's way more painful to rip it off slowly than it is at one fell swoop.
That's exactly right. But either way, that Band-Aid's coming off. So
Right.
let's get it off least painful as possible.
So I said I would end there, but I've got one more, right? So a lot of our sellers believe strongly in what we're doing. In fact, we only want to partner with sellers that believe strongly in what we're doing. And they decide to take some of their proceeds of the sale and roll that equity back into the business so they become owners in Zeus, which we love because now our goals are fully aligned. Our incentives are fully aligned. By bringing employees into the fold early, we get to meet them too.
That's right.
They get to know us too. And it's my experience that actually helps us further down the road. This entire conversation has been just about the transaction, but there's a post-transaction. Remember, not the end, but the beginning. Bringing them in has another benefit, and it's a benefit for Zeus as well, which also benefits the seller.
Well, that's exactly right. You think about the seller has rolled over some of their proceeds and they're an owner in Zeus. That's actually why we talk about it being a partnership. Everyone says, well, why do you say partnership? Why don't you say buy or acquisition? Well, those owners are actually now an owner in Zeus. That helps a couple different ways. It keeps everyone aligned in terms of the direction we're going, make sure we're incented to do the right things at the right time. It also lets their people know they believe in Zeus.
Yeah.
They're not just selling the business, they're reinvesting and staying involved. That goes a long way with employees. But you're absolutely right. Down the road, the employees, having seen that piece, they want to do the right thing for their family again. They want them to be successful a second time. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. So I think it's a great way to wrap this up. So my big takeaways are, and having done it myself, it is scary. And we're not trying to tell anybody that it's not in any way, shape, or form. We're acknowledging that it's a scary process. We're acknowledging also that the more you try to kick the can, the worse it gets, not better. And that if you actually engage with your employees in advance, what we've seen over the 24 transactions that we've been a part of is that there's often a better result.
That's absolutely right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do have to do it.
Thanks, Paul. Always a pleasure having these conversations with you. For our listeners, we know this part of the M&A process can feel daunting, but when approached with care, it can actually strengthen the culture you've worked so hard to build. If you're a seller wondering when and how to start that important conversation with your team, know that you're not alone. We've guided many others through this process with thoughtfulness, respect, and care, and we're here to support you too. Stay tuned for future episodes where we'll hear directly from sellers across the entire Zeus network about what helped them navigate this moment with confidence and care. Until next time, thanks for listening to the 3P's podcast. And remember, at Zeus, we're better when we're together.